Who the Wild Things Are with Ryan McGuire.
You gotta listen to your body.
Oh my God, maybe, I could get out there, I could do this.
Let's take a ride, find your wild side, real stories, see with your own eyes.
It's so beautiful.
I'm gonna have the best time out here.
I was in tears. I was like, that's the best, man.
Welcome back to Who the Wild Things Are. My name is Ryan McGuire, and I'm here to bring you conversations with the most wild folks on the planet. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you enjoyed the episode, share it with a friend. Appreciate you guys. Let's get it going. Okay, great news. For 2026, Last Mountain Man Standing is returning to Conifer, Colorado. What that means is we're going to be racing through the Rocky Mountains. It's a four-mile loop with Mountain Man style obstacles. If you make it through the loop in 1 hour, you get to keep going. If you make it through 6 loops, the 7th loop is a race on the same course to decide the last mountain man and woman standing. They will each win the cash prize and take it home with them, be crowned victorious. If you don't want to get competitive, you just want to come out, we're going to have a beautiful mountain camp set up with vendors, good vibes, everyone hanging out. You can do a single lap. We call that the Foxtrot for a discounted price. And ultimately, it's just a great day in the mountains. July 18th is when it's going down, and I hope to see you guys there.
All right, welcome back to Who the Wild Things Are. After some minor technical difficulties, we have arrived at the point in which we get to talk to the one and only Rhys Fontaine. Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me, dude. I'm excited.
I think the last time I saw you, you were on a long walkabout journey through the wilderness, so I figured that would be a good place to start just because, one, I want to know more about that trip. And I think it also would help people get kind of an understanding of the things you do and kind of who you are before we get into some other stories.
Right on. Yeah, I mean, this last summer, I did a pretty long walkabout, like you mentioned. It was 40 days, 40 nights in the desert of southern Utah. And yeah, I saw you probably like day 30-ish, somewhere around there for one day or 2 days. But it was kind of a coming together of a lot of different things in my life over a long period of time. And I've been into primitive skills, traditional skills, that kind of stuff since I was a little kid. And I've always envisioned going out and doing kind of a long walk with all this gear that I've made and having nothing from the modern world with me, and everything being natural from wild materials. I always hated looking at plastic and synthetic stuff when I was out there. And so I wanted to make everything. And so it kind of started a long time ago when I was a kid. And then I kind of got pushed into finally doing it because I went through a pretty rough breakup a couple years ago and I needed some direction in my life. And so that's why I decided I was like, I just got to have a positive goal that I can work to that's going to get my mind off of these negative thoughts and into something exciting and positive. And so that's why I decided to primarily do that walk. I was like, it's time. And so I spent an entire year for almost all day, every day for the most part, besides when I was working, moving towards creating all my gear and doing everything to go out on this long expedition. And then the expedition was really just the kind of final part of the journey in a lot of ways, is what it felt like. And it was kind of coming together of all those things in my life and all of the skills that I had obtained and acquired to that point. But yeah, I saw you on like day 30. We went fishing. We had some grub together. And it was a really good time. And that whole journey itself marked a big moment in my life. And it's hard to, like, even to this day, it's been months since it happened, to like kind of put it into words exactly what it was, to be honest. Because it was hard in a lot of ways. It was easy in a lot of ways. easier than this front country life in certain ways. It was not having any phone, not having any technology, and just kind of being in the moment and just kind of going one thing to the other, and just kind of how I feel is what I get to do, and not being pulled away and by emails or text messages or phone calls, or just like, oh, I got to go to this place and get this done. In that way, it was super liberating. And then it was difficult in the ways of I'm hungry, and like you don't have all your good food and that kind of stuff that you're normally used to. Um, but overall, it was an incredible experience. But yeah, it's kind of hard to put into words. I mean, I don't know if there's anything specifically that you're thinking about when you ask that question.
Yeah, I think you did a great job explaining. I think for you, it's so big that when you explain it, it probably feels like you're only getting to tell people 1% of the journey, right? When you go on a
Totally.
vision quest or on a walkabout, there's so much to it. It's so elaborate. Every moment is so vivid that to explain it is kind of a tough thing. And really, the reason I asked that question is normally in a podcast, I like to do things kind of in chronological order, right? Give people a sense of who this person is, how they grew up. But I think for you, what I want to do, I want to show people Rhys is here doing these really fucking cool adventures, right? This stuff is amazing. He's living a really full life that most people only dream about. But there was some stuff before this, which basically precluded maybe you, me, folks close to you, from believing any of this would be possible again, given kind of the circumstances that you went through. So I kind of want to back this up and to lay this up for folks that aren't familiar with the skills community. You, myself, a lot of our friends, we kind of teach these survival skills and take people out into the wilderness. And you specifically have a really amazing ability to help people connect with the wilderness because of the connection that you share. That was how you and I kind of first got to know each other. I actually went on a trip that you were apprenticing on. And then a couple years later, we reconnected and you kind of told me about this journey that I was unaware of. And that's really what I want to talk about today is your journey with Lyme, how the things that you love to do were nearly taken away, and how you kind of bounced back and seemingly made this impossible transformation. So I think to kick it off, give people a little bit of insight into how it was, I guess, how would you say that with a disease like Lyme? Do you catch it? What is it? Do you contract it?
Is probably the best word.
So let's kind of go back to square one. You're a wilderness teacher. How did you contract it?
So obviously Lyme disease comes from ticks. It's a tick-borne disease. And, I don't really actually know how or when exactly I got it. But most likely, I was working in DC and I was teaching homeschool kids survival stuff in the off season when I wasn't working at Boss, which is a school I typically work for in southern Utah. And I was teaching kids there. And, when I first got there, I was kind of homeless. Like I didn't really have a place to stay. And I was trying to go through the process of getting an apartment. And in that time, I was kind of just like sleeping in patches of woods around the city and throwing together like leaf duff beds and stuff, which is basically just a big pile of leaves that you sleep in, which is what I'm used to doing out west. Not thinking, that's really stupid to do that in the east where there's a lot of ticks. And it was a couple months after that time period when I was doing that I ended up getting what I now know were the first symptoms of Lyme disease. And so this was back in 2019 when this all arose. And yeah, it kind of started off with it really intense headaches, neck stiffness that was really severe, kind of just feeling like garbage, just low energy, lethargic, lightheaded, light sensitivity, headaches with any physical exertion, super stiff neck where it hurt to turn my head back and forth. And then that kind of progressed and more symptoms developed over time, which involved a lot of neurological stuff, a lot of like derealization. It's almost like almost similar to like a deja vu. But it's just kind of like a separation from your identity almost. It's hard to explain, but these like auras would come on periodically every single day, multiple times a day. Memory like problems, forgetting a lot of people's names and places and what I'm doing. And then that progressed into like physical neurological stuff, like a lot of neuropathy and muscle twitching that eventually started occurring all over my body, which I think we're all kind of familiar with. You might get a little muscle twitch in a bicep or something here and there, and it's like, oh, that's interesting. It's like my muscles twitching, does it a few times, it stops. It was similar to that, but it was constant and it was all over my body all the time. And so it'd be like my calf, boom, 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 my arm, boom, 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 do, 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 do. And it was like that fast, just muscles shooting off, twitching, contracting, nonstop, 24/7. And that went on for about a year, all day, all night. It would never end. And then that was coupled with all these other less physically noticeable neurological symptoms like the brain fog and everything else that I was telling you about. And it was so severe, I actually had to stop working there in DC. And I went ahead and I did get a test done eventually because I was like, something's really wrong with me. It could be Lyme disease. I'm in that community. So I went and got checked out. Came back positive. I took the antibiotics, but it'd been many months at this point, and the antibiotics, quite frankly, did virtually nothing in terms of me noticing any response. My symptoms all were still there, same level. Nothing changed with taking those antibiotics. And so I went through that course of antibiotics, and then I continued to progress and get worse. And I took a break from work. I went home. I got another round of antibiotics, and the same story repeated itself where I didn't see any sort of response. And then I started seeing Lyme doctors, and I started realizing like this is pretty common for a lot of people, and it's a big issue. And if it gets too chronic and goes too long without being treated, it can become a thing that you're dealing with potentially your whole life. And I started to realize like I might be in that category because I'm not responding. And, this happened to all these other people. This might be happening to me.
August 26th to the 30th, we are doing our Field to Feast trip. What that means, it's a 5-day trip where you're going to learn how to safely and responsibly dispatch an animal, process that animal, and learn to actually live on it while traveling through the wild with a band of beautiful humans. It's going to be in an amazingly beautiful area. We're going to learn how to forage wild edibles. We're going to learn how to make fire. We're going to learn all the skills you need to process an animal and use that animal, live with that animal for 5 days. And we're going to laugh a lot while we do it. So if you guys are interested, you can go to survivaluniversity.com, or you can go to the link in my bio on Instagram, or you can just reach out to me. Ask me a question. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Love you guys. Hope to see you in the bush.
And what age are you? What age are you at that point?
I'm 23 years old when all this started.
And for folks that don't know, like imagine, the 5 fittest people, like going into that would be the category Rhys would be in, right? Like extremely active human being, works on his feet, athletic, now to kind of this shell of that person.
It's a great way to put it. I mean, that's really how it felt. And I was, at that time in particular, I was in excellent shape when this happened. I was working out every day. Exactly what you said. My body is my life, like my career, everything depends on me being able to physically move through the world well and have good coordination and be able to do all these things and feel good and be in good shape. And so losing that was a huge blow and terrifying. And I was virtually bedridden. I mean, there was so many times it would ebb and flow like so many people with Lyme, where I would feel better for a week or two, and then I would get significantly worse for another few weeks. And then I would start to feel like I was coming out of it again, but never did come out of it fully. But it would kind of be this ebb and flow. But there was long periods where I was virtually completely bedridden for weeks at a time. And I started to see what's called a Lyme literate medical doctor, people who specialize in Lyme disease. They got me on tons of drugs, lots of antibiotics, and I just kind of went down that conventional route. You know, I was 23 and I didn't really know that much, and this is what people were telling me to do. And so that's what I did. And I was worried I was losing my mind. So I was like, pull out the big guns, give me this drug, whatever's strong, like just let's get this over with so I can move on. So I got put on like 4 different quadruple antibiotics for like a year straight. So I was taking like 4 different antibiotics all at the same time at full doses with a ton of other supplements and drugs at the same time to help with all these other things. And yeah, I didn't get any better. It was crazy. I went on for about 9 months taking that many antibiotics every single day, with almost no change in my symptoms throughout that entire period. In fact, everything actually got worse towards the end of all that. And it really wasn't until I saw this one podcast with this guy named Tim Ferriss. I don't know if people might be familiar with who he is, but he had Lyme disease at some point in his life as well. And he was talking about it. And he talked about how the ketogenic diet made a big difference with his Lyme and his cognitive problems. So I decided to give that a shot. Around that same time period, I also listened to a podcast with Paul Stamets, who's a guy who's well known for his research into mushrooms of all different kinds. And in this podcast, he was talking about psychedelic mushrooms, magic mushrooms. He was also talking about lion's mane mushroom. And these are mushrooms that are known to like regenerate nerves and do something called neurogenesis, which is the stimulation of growth of nerves and the myelin sheath around your nerves. And given that that's mainly what I was dealing with was nervous system problems. In fact, that was the scariest symptom of all. I was like, I can use whatever I can at this point. And so I was like, I'm going to try what he's talking about. I'm going to take some, what he calls stacking, which is taking lion's mane mushroom, some psilocybin mushrooms, and vitamin B3, niacin, for stimulating nerve growth. And at the same time, I'm going to do this ketogenic diet to kind of try to lower inflammation in my body and in my brain and just see if that works. And at that same time, I also quit taking all my antibiotics because my gut was completely destroyed at this point. And I was like, I just can't do this. If it hasn't worked in 9 months, then it's not going to work in 10. Like,
Yeah,
it's just
right.
that
It's and you're getting blood work, right? Like I assume at this point you're getting blood work. You have a good feel for, you know, what this heightened disease state of your body looks like. So you kind of have like an understanding of the numbers and the scientific part behind it. Because I think, you know, when I heard about this, my assumption would be, okay, anybody in the kind of woodsy primitive survival skills would be relatively anti-medicine and not medically literate. But knowing you, I know you're an individual who's going to seek to get all of the information. So I'm curious how you went about kind of understanding the disease, what kind of research you were doing, what kind of, blood work you were doing.
Yeah, I was doing regular blood work. Like, it was about on average every 2 weeks I was getting blood work taken.
Wow.
And I was looking at all kinds of different things, pretty much biomarkers. I would get tested for my Lyme, and the way that they do that here in the US is by looking at levels of antibodies. And so you're always going to test positive if you've contracted Lyme because you're going to have antibodies for probably most of your life, if not your whole life. And but the levels is what indicates it. So if you have like a very high level of antibodies, the way of thinking is that means you probably have a active infection, and so your body's trying to produce and pump out antibodies. But if it's like a very, very low number, then they assume that you probably don't have an active infection anymore because your body's just keeping around the bare minimum in case you're exposed again. And so I would consistently test positive for very high levels of antibodies throughout this entire period, indicating that it was still active. And it, of course, I felt it was. And then all these other markers too, which is just like inflammation markers, thyroid function, hormone levels, different things like that. They're just kind of an indicator of overall health. And so my inflammation markers were consistently very high. My thyroid function was consistently very low. And my hormones were consistently very off. And my white blood cell count and things like that were very high, also indicating my body's fighting something, a disease. And it was Lyme coupled with.
What about weight?
Yeah, well, I maintained reasonably normal weight up until towards the end when I did switch to this ketogenic diet, which I was on for a couple months prior to this all coming to an end, which we'll get to pretty soon. But I started that diet, which is basically, it's like 90% of your calories are coming from fat and 10% of your calories are coming from like protein and things like that. And there's virtually no sugar and no carbohydrates on that diet, virtually none. And so I started doing that diet. I eased my way into it, and I started to notice after about a week that a lot of my cognitive problems were not as bad when I was doing it. The muscle twitch was the exact same. It never went away. It was the same level. But in terms of brain fog, just general feeling of forgetfulness and depression and like the derealization that I was talking about, those all kind of got significantly better. None of them went away, but they got noticeably better. And so that was the first thing like that I had even done that worked. And so I kept like leaning into that and going into deeper and deeper states of ketosis to where it got to the point where I was basically just taking shots of like olive oil and spoonfuls of coconut oil for most of all of my food. And then I would eat like a small piece of meat or fish, here and there throughout the day. And that was pretty much it. Every once in a while I'd have some cauliflower rice or something like that just to switch it up. And when I was pretty much sustaining off of just pure oil, my brain felt reasonably good, and definitely noticeably better. And at this whole time, I'm also like starting to pop a ton of lion's mane mushroom that Paul Stamets talks about, which is not a psychoactive mushroom, but is known to regenerate nerves. And I started going about trying to acquire magic mushrooms. And eventually I did get the magic mushrooms, but it took some time to finally get to that point. But I got the mushrooms, and I was pretty curious at this point if they worked, if they were even legit, what I got. And so I wanted to try some, but also at this time, it's good to kind of paint a picture of where I was exactly at that moment. And at that moment, I was kind of at one of my lowest points because I had been doing that keto diet. It had kind of got me excited because I noticed some differences and some results and some changes that were happening. But it was about 2 months in, and I lost, I don't know how much weight altogether, probably somewhere around 30 pounds, but I was weighing about 127 pounds at that time, which is very small for me. I'm usually at around
What do you
150.
walk around at?
Like right now I'm about 160, and I say that's like my average weight all the time. It's around 158 to 160, somewhere in there. And so I was super skinny. It's just hard to keep weight on when that's all you're eating is pretty much oil and little bits of meat.
What do you think your like calories were in a day? You're talking about a spoonful here and there. That's like nothing.
Yeah, well, it was probably because I would take shots of olive oil throughout the day too, quite a few. And so I don't know how much it was, probably around 2,000 calories, maybe. I don't really know. But it was less than what I need to
Sure.
sustain clearly, because I did lose weight. Maybe 1,500 calories a day. It really is. I wasn't measuring.
Yeah. But I mean,
So
you're 40 pounds down from, yeah, like your normal Rhys weight, which is not a big
yeah,
guy to, begin with.
Okay, July 1st to the 5th, the Primitive Skills Run is returning to Colorado. What this means is we're going to be doing an ultralight trip, learning how to live off the land, learning how to forage wild edibles and catch fish, living really like our ancestors used to. It's going to be July 1st to the 5th. To sign up, you can go to thesurvivaluniversity.com, or you can go to the link in my bio. And remember, you don't have to be a runner necessarily to go on the Primitive Skills Run, but you do need to have a general level of fitness. If you have any questions, I can provide all the information. Just reach out to me personally or check out the website for more details. Hope to see you in the bush.
yeah, totally. I was skin and bone. Like, I was super skinny. And because of that, I started to actually get pretty hungry. And I was like, I can't keep doing this. Like, I can't sustain this diet. And so I went off of it to just try to put on some weight and see what happened, because I was feeling better. And I had high hopes, but then sure enough, within just a few days of coming off of that diet, all of my neurological symptoms went right back to being as terrible as they were prior. And remind you, none of them ever went away to begin with, but they just got horrible again. And within a few days of coming off of that diet. And so then I went back, and my neurological symptoms kind of got suppressed a little bit when I went back onto it. And I was like, I don't really know what to do. I feel helpless. Like, I got my hopes up with this diet and doing this stuff. And then now all of a sudden I realize, like, I'm losing all this weight that's not sustainable. And I don't know what to do now, because I'm not doing the drugs. I can't do that anymore. And then I've been going down this route, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be a sustainable thing long term. And so now I'm not sure exactly where to turn or where to go. And so I was kind of like hitting this rock bottom moment of, I finally had a little bit of hope, and then it kind of got squashed, really. And so that's right this moment when I got these magic mushrooms, and I decided to give it a go and try them. And I had nowhere really to turn at this point. And so I just took some of the mushrooms one random night, and I put them in my hand, and I looked at them. It was just a super small amount. I don't know how much, less than a gram, probably. But I was looking at them, a couple caps, a couple tiny little stems like this big. And I was like, I'm just going to try it. This is kind of a micro dose, and see if I just have some effects, just to kind of see how effective these are. They're legit. And I put them in my hand, and I cupped them, and I prayed, and I just said, God, please, please help me. Like, please help me get me through this experience. Please help heal me from this disease, and help this lead me out of here. And whatever your will is, let it be done. And I don't care how difficult that needs to be. I don't care how much I have to go through to get out of this. I'm willing to go through it, as long as I know that you can help me get my life back on track, and that I can be not sick anymore. And if I can get through this, I'll spend a large portion of my life making sure other people hear this story and helping people who are struggling with Lyme disease, because I now know how serious of a situation that is. So I made that commitment to God, and I told him that I was willing to go through whatever I needed to go through in order to get my life back. And then I ate those mushrooms. I popped them in, and I went and chilled, and I just sat on the couch, and I was like, we'll see if anything happens. And then within about 5 to 10 minutes, I started to feel the effects of these mushrooms kicking in. And it was terrible. Like, it was super anxiety ridden. I was like, how is this happening so fast? I thought this was supposed to take an hour to start feeling anything. I barely took anything, and it's like 10 minutes in, and I'm starting to trip out really hard. I'm seeing spirals on the walls and geometric patterns forming everywhere, and I'm like, oh man, this is not what I expected to happen from eating that tiny amount. Like, I'm not ready for a huge trip like this. And I started to have like panic attacks. As I'm seeing everything, my mind's expanding at the same time, and I'm realizing the seriousness of my situation. I'm like, I'm 23 years old. I'm debilitated in terms of sickness and health and everything. And I don't know where I'm going to go. I don't know where my life is going from this point on. I don't know if I'm going to be one of these chronically ill people that I've talked to or read about on all these forums who are 20, 30 years into this. And I was like, I realized, like, I was like, this is real. Like, this is my life. This is serious. And I'm dealing with something very difficult right now. And it caused a lot of panic in my body. And so I started having panic attacks like over and over again, heart beating, trying to catch my breath, getting up, pacing back and forth, just focus on breathing. And I would kind of calm down a little bit. And then my mind would go and I would start to spiral into another panic attack. And this happened over and over again. And it just continued to build and get stronger and stronger. And eventually, after probably an hour of this, I just sat down and I caught my breath and I started breathing and I kind of calmed down again. And I just was like, you know what? I'm in this, and I got to try to use this time and use this experience to try to do something productive. And so I just kind of allowed myself to calm down finally. And I just was focusing on my breath. And of course, while I'm doing that, I feel that muscle quit twitching and convulsions that were going on all throughout my body, which had been going on nonstop for the last 9 months. And so I just started with that. I started like just focusing in on the muscles that were twitching in my body. And at that time, I can't remember which one it was. Let's just say it was my thigh that was like twitching. And I just kind of closed my eyes and I started focusing in on that twitching in my thigh. And as I did that, I kind of had the sensation of like my mind and my body connecting into that muscle group in a weird way. It's hard to describe, but that was the sensation. It's like I kind of like honed in and locked in like this mind body connection with that thigh. And when I felt that kind of connection occur, this moment I felt that lock in, the muscle quit twitching and it sprung up somewhere else in my body. So it was like my bicep or something started twitching immediately after that. And so then I did the same thing. I focused in on my bicep, I breathed into it, and I felt myself slowly connect into that muscle group. And as I did that, as soon as I felt that lock in feeling again, it stopped twitching and it sprung up somewhere else. And so then I focused there and did it again, and then did it again and did it again. And so essentially I'm chasing this twitch throughout my body, connecting with those muscle areas, and then it would shoot off somewhere else and leave that spot. So it was super intriguing to me because nothing I had done at this point had had any effect on that particular symptom, the twitching. And I'd taken tons of magnesium. I'd taken all kinds of drugs. I had tried all kinds of like muscle relaxers, different things. I was desperate to get any relief from that insanely annoying symptom. And nothing ever did anything noticeable to that symptom, except for now all of a sudden I'm on these mushrooms and I'm connecting with those parts of my body, and it is having an effect. It's not going away, but it's doing something. And so I'm like, this is pretty interesting. I'm going to keep going with this, see where it ends up. So I continued to chase this twitch throughout my body. As I'm doing that, I'm tripping out, and I have my eyes closed and I'm seeing all kinds of stuff in my mind's eye. And I start to see these kind of geometric patterns start forming into almost like figures, kind of start to emerge out of the twisting, spiraling patterns. And it's like an archetypal Christ image forms out of these patterns. And also like an archetypal devil, like full on like cartoon almost, horns, forked tail guy, like just the classic thing. And then the classic image everyone has of Christ with the white robe and all that. And they physically started to battle each other in my mind's eye. And I can still remember that image so clearly of them clashing in my mind's eye. And it was corresponding with me connecting with these muscle groups and stopping the twitching. So basically I would focus in on the muscle group. As I would focus in and hone in on the particular muscle, God would get the upper hand in this battle with the devil. And God would basically get to a point where he would be about to kill the devil. And right before he would do it, crush his skull or whatever, right before he would do it, the twitching would stop. God would be about to kill him. And then right before he would, the demon, the devil, whatever, would get away. And the twitching would immediately spring up somewhere else on my body. And then they would continue the battle again as I would hone back in on that muscle. And then as soon as I would connect with it, the twitching would stop. God would be about to kill the devil, and then he would escape. And the moment he escaped, the twitching would spring up somewhere else on my body. So it was all connected. This spiritual realm of what I'm seeing in my mind, at least that's what it felt like, is completely connected with this twitch that's happening in my body. And the twitch is this demon. And the thing that's trying to stop it is this Christ. And it's morphing. It's not staying the same. It's not static. Christ is going from Christ image to Superman to like the archetypal God with the white beard kind of image, just kind of rotating from all these superheroes / Christ, Jesus, kind of thing. And then the demon's the same thing. He's going from a devil to like a demonic demon looking thing to Lord Voldemort from Harry Potter movies. It's just like this evil representation in my mind. And this went on for, I don't know how long. I have no clue, probably 20, 30 minutes of me just sitting there having these battles over and over again. And I can't remember how many battles I had. It was enough that I don't remember how many it was. Probably like 5 or 6 separate battles going on throughout this time period. And every time the demon would get away. And I just got frustrated after enough times, and I stood up and I was like, man, this is crazy. If I could just hold down this demon and God allow him to be held down long enough that God can kill him, this would be over. At least the twitch would be, because this twitch is this demon. I see it so clearly. I was like, God, but I can't do it. Like, he gets away every time. I was like, I just need to take a break, see what happens, but this is getting exhausting. And so I took a break, and up to this point, I'd been sitting in silence the entire time on my couch. I decided to turn on some music for the first time. So I turned on this song called "To Build a Home" by the Cinematic Orchestra. It's a very beautiful song, and it's very reflective, and it kind of builds up to like an epic crescendo towards the end of the song. And so I turned that on and I started listening to this. And as that reflective beginning started to play, I started to see like these flashes in my mind. And it was like, of all of these moments from my Lyme disease, like all the worst moments of my Lyme disease, starting from the very beginning. Like, I remember there was flashes of me like developing my first symptoms. And then there was flashes of me in the doctor's office, like when they first told me I had Lyme's disease. And then there was flashes of me realizing that they weren't working. And then I remember flashes of me, crying, like in my room, like, what is going on? Like, why is nothing working? These particularly horrible moments. There's one particular moment where I was cursing God. I was like, crying. I was down on my knees. I'm in my room, and I'm like, God, I hate you. Like, why'd you take my life away? And it showed me that moment, and like many moments similar to that throughout this journey. And it was from a third person perspective, which was weird. So I was looking at myself from outside of myself, and it was like almost a movie. It was almost like I don't know how to describe, like a life review. If you listen to those near-death experiences, it was like kind of similar to that in the way that it felt. And it was just like these flashes so quickly, but you knew what was happening. It's so hard to put into words. But each moment I felt like I was reliving that moment. Even though it was just these brief flashes, the full impact of the emotions of that moment were felt in my body when I would experience those flashes. And so it's like reliving it emotionally in my body. And it's a ton of terrible moments. So it's like a lot of pretty hard emotions, like just coming out, being relived. It's like a hurricane of like all of this desperate energy, this sadness, this depression, this fear of what was happening was just spiraling. I just could feel all of these horrible things just building as I relived everything. And then the song slowly progressed to the point where it started to build. And as soon as that song went from that reflective to like the beginning of the building portion of that song, I noticed a different flash for the first time and it was just brief at first. I don't remember what it even was, but it was just like a quick flash of something different. And my body felt like this moment of relief. It was just like I had all of the horrible emotions, and all of a sudden it was like peace for this split moment and just complete clarity. And then it went back to more of these moments of hardship during my Lyme disease that I do remember because I lived them. But as it built more and more and more of these flashes were of moments I didn't recognize. And when they would happen, I would have relief in my body, and then it would go back to the other ones. And it just built more and more to where eventually, as it started to approach the peak of the song, all of the flashes were of moments I didn't recognize. And I almost don't remember any of them. There's one that I do remember that was I was in the desert somewhere. I don't know where, but I was in the desert and there was someone next to me. And I said to that person, "Oh, yeah, I remember when I had Lyme disease." And then it went to the next flash. And I remember that one because it was the first inclination to me that these were events that I've not yet lived. And I don't know if they really are. They happen so quick. I don't know if, even if I was to experience those moments that happen in those flashes, I don't think I would recognize it in the moment. So at the very least, they appeared to be moments in the future that apparently I'm better based on what I said to that person. And I can feel it in my body because like at this point, it's only these future moments, and my whole body just is like relieved and at peace and liberated. And I know in my body that I'm better in these moments that I'm seeing. And then it finally gets to the peak of the song, and it hits the peak. And as it hits the peak, my whole body, uncontrollably, I'm not doing this consciously at all. Every muscle just completely contracts, and I tighten up into like the tightest little ball that I could possibly contract into. And my body just held this tension super tight for a few seconds, and then it just completely let go all at once. And I just fell backwards onto the couch flat, and I just let out this huge yell that was uncontrollable. It just came out. And I immediately sat up and was like, what is going on? You know, like, what is this? And as I was like trying to wrap my head around what was happening to me, I felt this pressure building in the base of my spine. And it just continued to build and build and build. And within 30 seconds, it went from barely noticeable to like overwhelming feeling of this pressure in the base of my spine. And then all of a sudden it just like popped, and it just went, and this energy felt like it spiraled its way up my spinal column, and then it went into my head. And when it got into my head, all I saw was white. Like it was just pure white. And I thought I was having a full-on stroke. I thought I was like having a serious medical emergency at this point. But after a few moments, the white light subsided and I was left just sitting there. And the whole trip was over, like in a moment, which is not normal for mushrooms in my experience in the past and since, that it doesn't just end in a moment kind of thing. But it did. Like I had no more hallucinations. I didn't have any more of all these um, experiences that I was having prior. Like the trip came to an end. I was completely grounded. I was back to myself. But there was a little bit of difference in the sense that my mind felt completely empty, and I felt completely empty as a being, and I felt incredibly good. Like I just was at so much peace in my body, and I just felt this warmth and this joy in my coursing through my entire body. And I knew in that very moment, I had no doubt that something serious had just happened to me, and that things were not going to be the same, and that this disease was going to be different. And I knew it was not going to last. I knew I had won at that moment. There was not a single part of my body that had any fear at all that this was going to continue. And I just sat there for like 3 hours, just blissing out in silence, just sitting there smiling, just like, this can't get any better. I can never feel better and more at peace than what I feel at this exact second. And then I would get a wave of just more peace, and I would be like, wow, I didn't there's no way you can feel more joy than this. And then it would just come again, and it would come again, and it was just like the best few hours of my entire life, honestly. And I was just sitting there taking it in. And what was very interesting is within a few minutes of that thing coming into my head and the white light and all that happening, and I was just left sitting there, it all of a sudden it hit me. I was like, wait, I'm not twitching. And I was like, where's the muscle twitch that has been nonstop for 9 months and hasn't stopped for more than 2 seconds at any given time? It's just gone. And I was like, what? For the first time. And so I went to bed that night. I woke up the next morning. Twitch is still not there. Neck's a little bit stiff still, but way better than it had been in the days prior. Still felt a little bit off, but not that. I mean, I felt noticeably better than I did the days before, and the twitch is gone. Went through that day. Even by the end of that day, I was feeling better than I was at the beginning of the day. All my symptoms were just watching them go away in front of my eyes. Within 1 week, I had 0 symptoms left from my Lyme disease. And I was back to, with 1 week after that experience, I went out and ran 10 miles one day. And I had no symptoms at all. And I was like, this thing's gone. I was like, this is crazy. I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was so happy. It was a true miracle. Really. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it other than it was a gift from God. It was a miracle, and it happened. And these things can happen. And I went and got my blood work done because I had it scheduled. I've been doing it every 2 weeks, like I talked about earlier. And I had it scheduled, and I went in. They took my blood, and I already knew it was going to be normal because I was normal. I felt it. But sure enough, they sent back my results, and for the first time, everything was normal. My inflammation markers were normal. My thyroid function was normal. My hormones were normal. My antibodies for the Lyme were low, very low compared to what they had been in the past. And I was like, I know, I'm not surprised. I feel like myself again. And that really was what gave me my life back, was that experience in that time. And, I do have to disclose that I do notice that twitch in my body very rarely. It's not that it 100% went away. It virtually did. It went from this constant thing to I'll go days without having it happen at all now. Whereas before it wasn't even more than 2 seconds. And then now I'll have, one day here and there where I notice it here and there a couple times throughout the day. I'll be like, oh, so it's like almost this like slight reminder that like it's maybe still there, to a certain extent, but my life is completely back to normal. This isn't destroying my quality of life. I don't even think about it 9 days out of 10. Like it doesn't even come into my mind, the twitch, because it's not even there. But every once in a while it shows back up again, and for just a moment, and it's like you gotta keep on track, because this thing's still there. I think to a certain extent.
It's like a gratitude twitch. Like it just reminds you. It's like, hey, remember how bad this shit used to be? And it's like, oh, let me just think about that, give thanks, and then I'll move on with my day.
Totally, dude. That's a good way to put it. It does feel like that, and it always brings me right back. I think back to all of that happened when I start singing it. I was like, I do not want to go back there ever again. And so, yeah, that's the story. And that was 5 years ago. And I was able to go back to Utah and work at Boulder Outdoor Survival School, which was where I was working prior to getting sick. And I was able to lead courses, month-long courses at a time, hiking, some over 100 miles at a time through the desert or on these courses that we teach. And I would have never dreamed in the middle of that Lyme that I would be back there in a year doing those courses with the state that I was in. And so it was just this surreal thing being back out there and realizing I'd been given a second chance at life. And, one thing I thought about a lot during this whole experience was, I'd had this dream my whole life to be out in the woods and to survive off the land and to be wearing all buckskins and to live that life at some point in my life. Like that was always my goal. That was the thing that excited my spirit and my soul. And when I was going through this, I thought about that a lot. I was like, was that just, for nothing? Like, cause now I'm dealing with this. And, going out and doing that 40-day, was really a big deal because it was like, I didn't think I was ever going to be able to do that. That was a dream that I thought was taken away from me, and God gave it back to me. And I was able to go out and have that experience and be out there and commune with God, quite frankly, on that experience, and be out in the woods and be in that silence. And it was really a dream come true. And all of that was made possible by this blessing that happened in my life. And yeah, I think about it all the time.
Yeah, and you tell the story, so well, so visceral and detailed, and I think it's a remarkable story that everyone would benefit from hearing, and I think it's at a good time, right? Like, when we were growing up, mushrooms weren't really like in the zeitgeist. It was like kind of like that thing that like your weird uncle did, but like you don't really talk about it and no one else is like interested in it. It's like kind of you're shunned if you believe that there's any medicinal purposes. Like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of the God teachings I grew up with were like, God made everything on the heaven and the earth except mushrooms. Don't do those. It's just like, mind altering substances had no medical or no place in medicine, no place in healing, whether that be like psychological wounds or visceral physical wounds. And now it seems like that page is turning and people are becoming a lot more open-minded. So I think these stories are really important.
Yeah. And I thank you for allowing me to speak it on this podcast, because that was one of the commitments I made to God, is that I would try to help other people. And I think the best thing with the Lyme disease is to let people know that there's people who do get better. and I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people who get better. They leave the forums, they leave the chats online, and so you're stuck with all the people who didn't get better on all those sites and whatnot. And so people just need that hope. I remember when I was going through it, I would listen to stories of people who did get better, and I listened to them over and over again because I just needed to know it was possible. And I've told this story on a few different podcasts now, and it's part of my commitment, is like to get this story out there to people, just let people know it's possible. And it doesn't matter if it's Lyme disease or something else, like I know this is possible with other things because I've heard plenty of other people who've had amazing things happen to them in the context of illness and disease, who've fully recovered in miraculous ways. Cancer, all kinds of crazy stuff has happened where people have completely gotten better, and it's there. And like, it doesn't necessarily, like, it's not a formula. You don't take mushrooms and you're going to have this experience that gets you better. For me, it was a combination of things, I think, because I was at rock bottom. I was super open at this point because I was at rock bottom, and they came in at the right time, and I took them, and I was in the right state, and it almost facilitated something greater, to occur that was in a lot of ways made more likely to happen because I was on the mushrooms, but wasn't the mushrooms themselves. That's my belief, at least my belief with it is like, it just facilitated this spiritual experience, which I think we all have access to, and it can be through mushrooms potentially for some people, and it can be through other things, and just meditation and prayer, and these states and these things can happen, I believe. And so it's just important for people to realize, that there's always hope.
It doesn't have to be, psychedelics. It could be silence and solitude and fasting and the other ways in which you can change your state, change your mind. And I think you're a beautiful example of you never know what someone is going through or what someone has been through. I surely think about my own mindset in the past. I had a bout with chronic illness 2 years ago, and I never understood it right before that. I could never, fully empathize with people when they said they couldn't get out of bed every day for weeks on end until it happened to me. And when I see you, I look up to you in so many ways, and I think a lot of folks do, but it's a great reminder of you don't know what they went through, right? Like any person you meet on the street could have gone through a similar torturous event, and bringing that mindset into interactions with people just makes the world a better place. Understanding that they may have gone through something you can't even understand, something they don't even understand, something so tough. And yes, maybe you see on social media their life looks amazing, they've never had any hardship, everything's rainbows, but we never really know what other individuals have battled.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you haven't gone through it yet, you will in a matter of time. Like, it happens to all of us. And I didn't realize you dealt with a chronic illness. What was it that you were dealing with?
Yeah, I don't even know.
Really?
Yeah, some mix of could have been like some waterborne illnesses. We did a lot of tests, never really figured it out. Yeah, I was basically bedridden for an entire summer, which is really hard for me because being on the trails in the summer is kind of like what I live for. And then I ran Leadville 100 after being really sick. I basically was going to pull out of the race, and then I decided to try and go on a long solo called the Collegiate West, and I did an 80-mile walk, and I felt okay. So then I showed up at the Leadville 100, and I felt okay for the first 93 miles, and then I started bleeding in my stomach, and had a near-death experience. The doctors told me I was going to die. Went through this whole thing. When I went like into the emergency room, I recognized the nurse. Like I had already known her, but she didn't recognize me. I went like into this kind of like floaty nebulous state, had seen everything already before. And it was a couple weeks before my 29th birthday. I had always told my mom, she was the only one I was comfortable with, that I always had this premonition of dying at 28. And this was like, yeah, like a week before my 29th birthday. And I was like, this is everything I've already seen. And then, yeah, I was pretty sure this is how it ended. And then at the last minute, the doctor runs in, and when you're anemic, like when you've lost a ton of blood, basically like my blood markers that were supposed to be at 300,000 were at 27. So I had lost a ton of blood according to them. But when you're anemic, you don't really understand like difference. Like you kind of feel like you're half asleep all the time because your body just doesn't have enough blood. And then the doctor runs in and says, hey, all the tests were wrong. You're going to be fine. And yeah, it just basically turned out like everything dramatically turned around, and I ended up being fine and made a full recovery. But yeah, it was a scary situation.
Yeah, dude, that's crazy. And from that point on, did things turned around for your overall health, like in the days and weeks to come, or was
Yeah, I
it
had to take
still?
it super easy for like 3 months after that. And then I got hit by like a wave of it in 2025 for like a month. But nothing. Yeah, I mean, that was like the only resemblance of it. Like you were saying, like the dissociation, I call mine malaise, which means like it's just I couldn't get out of bed, and I just like I couldn't do anything. I could barely move. But like the symptoms were very hard to point to. I was very dizzy and had general malaise and no energy to move. So it's kind of like having the flu, but for months. That's like the best way I could explain it.
And then it slowly just kind of subsided again.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of sauna, fasting, meditation. That was kind of my thing. I was convinced that it had to do with parasites too. I had a guest on here called Kay Kroll who she talks about a lot about Lyme, co-infections, parasites, things like that. So I did a ton of work with her, parasite cleanses. I mean, I tried everything. And so when you try everything, it's kind of hard to tell what worked.
Yeah.
I was getting blood work done, but like I was trying every intervention possible. I was just, yeah, desperate. It wasn't nearly to the extent that you were. Like I didn't, like my blood work was relatively insignificant. I lost about 20 pounds. But generally speaking, I think of it as like a good thing. I think it made me like understand mortality a lot better and understand what people go through.
Yeah, totally. I feel like these things kind of give us a lot of compassion for other people, you know, especially when you experience it when you're young, because when you're young, you don't think about that stuff. You know, you just, all these other people are, you know, that's stuff that happens to other people. You don't really think about illness. You don't really think anything's going to happen to you. And then it does. And then you realize, oh no, this shit's real. Like this life is no joke. And there's a lot of people dealing with this way worse, way longer. And all of a sudden you just like have a lot more appreciation for this life. But then you also have a lot of compassion for other people. But
Yeah,
that's wild to me that you had this near death experience and that you had that premonition before, like when you were a kid.
my whole life I've had
That's
it. Like it's flashed
really
my whole life. Yeah. And I actually
interesting.
I thought like as I was approaching 29, it was just like a couple weeks before. So this was late August. And I turned 29 at September 4th. I was like, oh, I made it to my 29th birthday. I guess that was all just like made up illusions in my head. And then boom, like my near death experience happens. So Yeah, I don't know. But I told my mom for years, I had told ex-girlfriends, like people I was really close to, like in terms of like planning. I was like, just so you know, like this is something I see in my future. I don't know why. And turned out it was just uh kind of a gotcha moment from whoever sent it to me. Like, I tricked you. You believed it.
Yeah. Well, thank God it didn't
Yeah.
turn out.
Now we're all healthy and the story ends on a bright note, you know, and we get to keep doing cool stuff in the woods and keep adventuring. And yeah, I look forward to keeping up with everything you're doing and sharing a lot more time on the trail together.
Same, brother. I really look forward to seeing you. Hopefully sooner than later. So
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great. Anytime you're in Colorado, obviously, always welcome. And definitely be down in Utah. I know we were talking about you're potentially going to live in a cabin over the summer down in Utah. Is that where you're still at?
so I'm actually in Tennessee right now,
Nice.
where I grew up, and I'm visiting family, and I'm actually at my mom's place right now. I'll be here a couple more weeks, and then I head back out to Utah. And I'm actually going to be staying with one of my friends when I get back out there. And then as things warm up, I'm going to spend a lot of time just out again, like when I saw you last year, just out in the field. Um, I'll bring rations, food with me this time, more so, but I just want to spend as much time out there as I can this summer. And I'm going to be doing some courses and guiding private courses and different things like that. And I'm making clothes for people is kind of my main gig now. Um, but I'll be out there. So if you come down to southern Utah, please let me know. We can meet up again and have another adventure.
I'd love that. Rhys, thank you so much for your time. How can folks follow along or check you out if they want to hear more about your story?
Um, I'm not super active on really anything. I do have an Instagram, Rhys Fontaine. My name's spelled Rhys, but there's not a lot on there. But there is on YouTube, Coyote Bushcraft channel I started years ago, and I haven't been active in a while. But there is a video on there where I talk about my experience with Lyme disease, and I go into depth about this experience that I had. If you want to look into that again, and you can contact me if you want on Instagram, or you can also do it by just commenting on that video. And I get back to people, and I talk to people all the time who saw that video and are going through stuff. And I'm here for anybody who needs to talk to somebody, because there was people who talked to me when I was really sick and dealing with it, and they were a big help for me. So yeah, look into that video, and you can get in contact with me through the comments on that.
Amazing. Well, I think this is a great episode that a lot of people are going to benefit from, and appreciate you being here. And until next time, everybody, stay wild.
All right, thanks, brother. You too.